Human societies move in cycles of order and collapse, clarity and confusion, unity and fracture. These oscillations reflect more than political instability or economic shockwaves. They reveal something deeper about the condition of human consciousness itself. When a society loses its inner equilibrium, when people become emotionally reactive, polarized, and disconnected from their own inner lives, chaos inevitably follows. Consciousism argues that the root of social disorder is a crisis of consciousness, and therefore any meaningful path forward must begin with a transformation of inner awareness. Chaos, in this view, is not the sign of a doomed world but the raw material out of which a more integrated one can be built. At the heart of this philosophy lies the idea that the subjective experience of each individual is not an incidental detail of human existence. It is the very medium through which society forms and reforms itself. We do not simply witness the world, we recreate it every moment through the meanings we attach to events, the fears we project onto others, and the ethical orientation we bring into our interactions. Civilization, then, is not an external machine grinding along on its own. It is a mirror of the interior lives of its people. When consciousness is fragmented, society is fragmented. When consciousness becomes coherent, society follows. Periods of chaos play a necessary role in this process. They break down rigid assumptions, expose hidden contradictions, and reveal the inadequacy of outdated frameworks. Personal crises often force individuals to let go of illusions they once believed were essential. Societal crises function the same way, shaking institutions and belief systems that can no longer sustain human dignity or meaning. Consciousism contends that chaos is not a failure, it is a transition stage between paradigms. Like wildfire clearing dead brush so new growth can take hold, disorder clears space for the next evolution of understanding. The shift from chaos to coherence begins when individuals stop reacting blindly to events and start observing their own internal states. Awareness dissolves the illusion that one's immediate emotional response is equivalent to truth. A society governed by reflexes, fear, rage, tribalism, cannot sustain stability. But once individuals begin to recognize the mechanics of their own perception and conditioning, they gain the ability to respond instead of react. This single shift, from unconscious reflex to conscious insight, is the hinge upon which transformation turns. Reflection deepens this shift. By pausing, examining one's thoughts, and considering the inner life of others, people create internal space where empathy and creativity can grow. Conflicts that once seemed irreconcilable become opportunities for understanding. This reflective capacity is not merely a personal virtue, it is a social technology. It reduces violence, fosters cooperation, and creates networks of trust capable of supporting more humane institutions. This leads naturally to integration, where insights gained internally shape action externally. Individuals with coherent inner lives engage with the world differently, with steadiness rather than volatility, with curiosity instead of hostility, with moral imagination rather than moral panic. Integrated consciousness scales upward. It becomes visible in the systems a society builds, its laws, its economy, its educational models, its cultural norms. Coherence at the individual level becomes coherence at the civilizational level. A key element of this transformation is the recognition that every person is a center of subjective experience. When this becomes undeniable, ethics shifts dramatically. It becomes impossible to justify exploitation or indifference when one sees others not as objects, categories, or enemies, but as conscious beings with hopes, fears, and interior worlds as vivid as one's own. Compassion becomes the default, justice becomes a requirement, and cooperation becomes a natural extension of shared interiority. This relational awareness lays the foundation for a society that rejects dehumanization in all its forms. When a society begins organizing itself around this consciousness-centered perspective, its structures inevitably change. Transparency becomes essential because hidden information breeds fear and manipulation. Dialogue becomes the preferred method of problem-solving because domination fails to nurture long-term solutions. Power becomes distributed rather than concentrated, reflecting the fact that consciousness is not hierarchical but universal. Education becomes oriented toward expanding awareness, not merely transferring information. Governance shifts toward fostering psychological well-being and ethical maturity rather than enforcing conformity or obedience. Consciousism, therefore, is not only a philosophy but a practice. It calls for continual self-observation, the dismantling of inherited assumptions, intentional decision-making, and a sustained effort to perceive others with clarity and empathy. When enough individuals engage in this internal revolution, society undergoes an external one. The world reshapes itself around the collective quality of consciousness. Humanity stands in a precarious moment. The turbulence of the present era signals that the old paradigm, one built on fear, separation, and unexamined reactivity, has reached its limits. But chaos is not the end, it is the beginning of the next stage. Consciousism provides a framework for moving through this turbulence with purpose. By aligning the inner life of individuals with awareness, compassion, and integration, we create the conditions for a coherent civilization, one where human beings flourish rather than fracture. The future is not predetermined. It will be shaped by the consciousness we bring into it. If individuals awaken, societies will awaken with them. Coherence is not a distant dream but the natural outcome of enough people seeing clearly and acting with intention. From chaos, coherence can rise. From fragmentation, a new unity can be built. And from a more awakened humanity, a different kind of civilization can finally take root.